spirituality, and empowerment. And I am joined today with Dr. Tanya Tinsley from Pennsylvania, a mentor of mine. I'm going to go over a long, extensive introduction of her in a little while, but I want her to go ahead and kind of maybe introduce herself, a brief introduction, and then I want her to do our therapeutic moment where we have a reading, inspiration, and we help the center, and we generally have a prayer. So, Dr. Tinsley, are you with us?
I am with you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very honored and humbled to be here with you today, this morning.
Yes. Well, we're glad to have you. So, if you would lead in our devotion, and then we're going to start talking.
All right, that sounds good. My scripture reading comes this morning from Mark 12:28 to 30. And one of the scribes, an expert in Mosaic law, came up and listened to them arguing with one another and noticed that Jesus answered them well, asked him which commandment is first and most important of all. Jesus answered, the first and most important one is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, life, and with all your mind, thought, and understanding, and with all your strength. The scripture this morning will lead into our discussion where we're talking about a connection between mind, body, and soul. And so let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this morning on 108 Praise Radio. Please allow Bryan and I to touch the listening audience this morning, to speak to them through mind, body, and soul. Lord, we know that you are a wonderful counselor, and so we just ask that you guide Bryan and I's discussion so that we may be able to touch in one accord the listening audience. We thank you, we praise you, and we bless you. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Tinsley. I want
You're
to
welcome.
begin talking, Dr. Tinsley, about how I met you. And
Okay.
we were in a program. You've already graduated. I will be graduating in May with my Doctor of Ministry degree from United Theological Seminary. And we were in the same group, and I came in, I'm not going to go into great depth, but I came in really not wanting to do the program. I'm just being honest. And I also came in just really discouraged in ministry with the church and mental health. And so this show is even a product of what I'm doing and how I felt about ministry at the time. I was still, of course, in ministry, but I just wanted to do my practice. I didn't want to be bothered with the church. I just said, if people get mental health services, they'll be okay, they'll be fine. And, all of us even, have moments in our career and in our lives where we get discouraged. But I will never forget the time, and I'm being very honest, you pulled me aside and you spoke words of life to me and was like, Bryan, don't give up. And you also spoke, and even when I didn't even want to take notes on what I needed to be doing to work on my project, you took notes for me and sent the notes to me. So I'm just excited. I'm just so honored to have you on my show. You are such a mentor and a blessing to me, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, but just your experience and your specialty in integrating the mental health and the spiritual components is so vital. So I want you to just give a little introduction. You have, a PhD, you have a DMed, you have a master's, you have all kinds of specialties. You're a clinical director, executive director. Just tell the people who you are so they'll know who you are.
Not a problem. Well, thank you very much. And Bryan, I do want to just kind of say, when we were at United Theological Seminary together and I pulled you aside, one of the things that I was trying to get you to understand that I had to learn is that we were there for a reason, to bridge the theological, biblical concept with the clinical, psychological counseling. And, when we talk about...
Say that again, because people, that was fast.
Okay. We had to really realize that we were there for a reason, because we were there to marry the theological and biblical concepts with the psychological and counseling concepts. And that is really new. That is really new. And so God, I believe, sent us there. And we had to really look at how we look at church. Church is just not within the four walls of the mortar brick building. But for you and I, church is also our counseling sessions, our private practice, our work with training and supervision. And so that's one of the ways I look at it, because, you know, it says in Matthew, for where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there. All right. And so church can be anywhere in our private practice, when we're teaching, when we are in the church as well. And I think that's what I had learned from my mentors and being at United, and that was what I was hoping to share with you during that time.
Yes, and that's part of being in ministry and a specialty. And a lot of times, clinical training is not part of a lot of ministers, you know, focusing on clinical training. And so you're definitely correct. But talk a little bit real quick about yourself. Of course, I know you, but I want people to know all the wealth of knowledge and experience and things that you're doing as well.
Absolutely. And so I think that scripture just describes, I have the best of all worlds that I want to be a part of. Yeah. So currently, I am the clinical director of the Mount Airy Counseling Center, which is part of the Mount Airy Baptist Church in Pittsburgh, PA, where Dr. William H. Curtis is the senior pastor. So we have a full-fledged counseling center. I was just looking at our list of counselors the other day, and we have 10 counselors, wow. Those who are licensed, master's level, and then we also have 2 interns. And we have people with the background in professional counseling, social work, marriage and family therapy. And what we do is integrate the spiritual and Christian perspective within the counseling process. I'm also the owner of my...
I'm sorry, and this is in a church, right? I just want to make sure people understand that.
It is in a church. Dr. Curtis, our senior pastor, back in 2007, had a vision where we needed to marry theology and biblical concepts with psychological concepts. We have this approach that sometimes people may not grow in their faith, may not develop spiritually because of something that may be going on psychologically or mentally. So he felt that as he was trying to grow souls, grow faith, and strengthen faith, we need to have a part where we're dealing with the psychological concept.
Wow, that is like cutting edge to what we're doing in ministry. I tell you, powerful. What else do you do, Dr. Tinsley?
So as a part of that, I also teach. I was teaching at California University of Pennsylvania for 9 years, training counselors. And then I just was teaching Waynesburg University. So I really think it's important to train culturally competent clinicians who work with a diversity of individuals and families.
Okay.
So so in addition to clinical counseling, in addition to teaching, I also supervise. I think it's important for our listening audience to know that although we are clinicians, we have our license, we still have to undergo supervision. We need to be able to manage what's going on with ourselves as well as with our clients. So when I say I have the best of all my worlds, I teach, I counsel, I supervise, and then I also consult. One of my specializations is sports counseling. So I do a lot of work with athletes, and I am part of the clinical advisory board with the National Football League. I have done some work with high school and college athletics, Division I, Division II, and Division III. I really got a lot of experience with my role in the Play It Smart program that was part of the National Football Foundation. And so really helping the athlete population developing psychologically as well.
Wow. So that is a wealth of experience and knowledge and just, bringing different specialties to ministry. And that's what we talk about on this show, on the Therapeutic Conversation show. We address specialties, especially with the clinical training. Now, I want to jump right in to a conversation that we kind of had last night on the phone, dealing with counselors, and there was a powerful experience. If you can share something of that nature, because we want our listeners, and this is what we've been talking about, ever since the show has been on, we've been talking about shattering the stigmas of mental health in our churches and in our communities. And you brought up something powerful about counselors understanding the spiritual integration. And that was just powerful. So if you would just share with the audience, whatever you feel led to talk about, because here on this show, we really address those issues that are very vital, because we're not dealing with the mind. We're not dealing with the mental processes, and people are really hurting and struggling to just make ends meet sometime and really understand where they are and what's really happening. So if you would share, that would be awesome. And I know our audience will be blessed by that.
Thank you. Yes. And, we talk about this marriage between theological, biblical concepts with psychological concepts. And that was something that really came up with a session that I had where I had to marry the two. Now, let me just say this for our listening audience. All clinicians who are licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, psychologists, we have to adhere to ethical codes. So I think it's really important, legally and ethically, we have a duty to be competent in our areas of expertise. And if we're not, we need to make sure that we refer that client to somebody who is appropriately trained.
Yes.
In the American Counseling Association, we have an ethical code that states that we need to be multiculturally and social justice competent, and we also need to be competent in the spiritual, ethical, and religious values in counseling. So I pride myself on making sure that I am able to be competent in those areas and integrate that in my counseling process. I have a client who specifically came to me because I do integrate that Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. She has just become a member of the body of Christ this summer. And she comes from a cultural background where Christianity is not the norm. She comes from an Asian population where there was this stigma that being a Christian, it's like a cult. And so she was having this internal dissonance in terms of her identity development and meaningful relationships in the body of Christ versus in her culture. They are very much individualistic. And so one of the things I had to help her to understand developmentally, this is the psychological component.
Yes.
She is where she is supposed to be because she is transitioning into adulthood, and this is the time to develop intimate relationships versus isolation. Wow. Additionally, I helped her to understand, we talked about the fall of Adam and Eve, and it resulted in 4 broken relationships with self and broken relationships with others, and that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to restore those relationships so that she's in that beginning process of having those relationships restored. The look on this young lady's face was just phenomenal because she finally had something to make sense about what she was going through. And had I not been able to bring that into the counseling session, I could have done more harm with her. And the goal is to help her to understand that what she's going through is not abnormal. These are normal reactions to this extraordinary event in her life.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I heard you say something at the beginning about competencies. And even in ministry these days, there is no reason why ministers cannot be competent. And that means, right. Even if people don't go to seminary, they can still go to some kind of accredited Bible college or get the knowledge or education that they need to be effective in their own churches and in their own work. Because many people have right. calls, but they don't invest. Every discipline from a doctor to a nurse to a social worker to whoever have education, and they also generally have a license or some type of ethical code that they have to follow. So, as we know in counseling, the number one code is do no harm. And as yeah. you were talking, I'm thinking about ministers and churches that are doing people harm, that are not helping people because they're broken. And you said something about broken relationships and really understanding that. And that's the value of being in counseling. It helps people to understand those broken relationships and those patterns that continue on and on and on, but helping to heal and to move to a better place mentally and spiritually, because it's all connected. So I thought that was powerful what you said, and using those psychological concepts and interventions to be able to guide people into a better place, because living as a Christian, it should be abundant life. It
Absolutely.
should be transformative. It should be therapeutic. It should be helpful. And a lot of times people are stuck, Dr. Tinsley, as we know, in process, and they think what they're going through is abnormal. And that's what you just said. And I thought that was just powerful, how you brought that out about people thinking things are abnormal when we can begin to help people work through those things so they can walk in victory and overcome some of those things, because we overcome by the word of our testimony, right? And so even helping those things and helping to talk. What else, what other experiences have you had, Dr. Tinsley? Because I know you have a wealth of knowledge.
Well, let me say this, because I wanted to address, and this is part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure that pastors, ministers, counselors, we all practice in the scope of our training. And one of the things that I appreciate about my pastor at Mount Airy Baptist Church is that if a pastor does not have the training in social work or counseling, they are to stick to that whole theological scriptural counseling. And that we have a duty, we talk about those ethics, we have a duty to refer a person to the person, a person who is trained. And I think as ministers, as pastors in the church, we do have an ethical code. Our number one Christian ethic is to love. And, it says in Micah 6:8, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and love mercy. When we talk about justly, we need to make sure that we're working collaboratively in the church, and that we are making sure, just like it says in the body, everybody has different gifts, and we come together to be able to minister and counsel to that individual. So part of the experience at Mount Airy, and we are a mega church, we have over 10,000 members on the book.
Powerful
but we
ministry.
have worked with all of We have worked with all of the ministries to educate them on what is the counseling and psychological component that we have at our church. And so our ministries now know if there's something psychologically going on, to bring in one of the counselors. And I think that is so important. Additionally, our senior pastor talks about mental health from the pulpit, and that is really important. And he brings it in and talks about mental health and mental illness from a biblical and theological perspective, but he also talks about, yes, God will provide, and he might provide somebody in the body who's trained to work with you with your depression or with your anxiety. So I really think part of my experiences are developing partnerships within the church, but also outside of the church, because we also have to have a partnership with other local counseling agencies, psychiatric hospitals, drug and alcohol, so that we can refer out into the community as well. So part of that experience is really developing partnerships and all of us coming together to work together for the good.
Wow, that is so powerful. And I just want to recap what you just said about walking in your scope of training and your scope of expertise. And that is part of the problem. A lot of times I know historically, especially in the African American context, the minister was everything. The minister was the preacher, the minister was the teacher, the minister was, the counselor, the minister was the theologian, and similarly we call it the resident theologian. So we see all of these type of things being put on a minister, but now we have, there's a new way of doing things. It doesn't mean we disregard the old way, but if there's specializations, and that also prevents harm from being happening when we can refer and walk in our own scope. secondly, I just it resonated to me what you talked about when it comes to the sermons about preaching about mental health, normalizing mental health, that it's okay. You don't have to be alone, that you can get the help that you need, and through those partnerships. And those things are very vital when we talk about counseling and helping churches, that even though there's a counseling center in the church, there are still specialties that the church is not equipped to handle. And sometimes people, so what I do a lot of times, Dr. Tinsley, is I allow people to either come to the church and maybe meet with me, or they can go to my private practice because of confidentiality.
Absolutely.
And those dual relationships.
Absolutely.
Can you say a little bit about that, dual relationships and confidentiality, and how that's handled in your particular context?
Absolutely, and that is really important. So we are in our 8th year with the Mount Airy Counseling Center.
Wow!
When we first started, it was really important for us to set up shop in a way that we can maintain confidentiality and privacy. And it's really important people understand when they come to the Mount Airy Counseling Center, those ethical codes I talked about,
yes,
we have to maintain privacy and confidentiality. So we don't go and disclose that to other pastors or ministers unless we have an informed consent.
Yes.
Now, where we are located, we have grown exponentially. We are going to be moving into a new space that's separate from the church itself, which is going to add another layer of confidentiality and privacy. That is really important. But then we also have to have a list of resources of other counselors in the community to give individuals options of, no, I would prefer not to come to the church. Okay, I'm in the community, I have my private practice, but I can give you a referral to other individuals who are in the community.
Wonderful.
Because some people don't want to be tied to the church. And that's why I said we have to have that community partnership and know who is in the community, because if somebody doesn't want to do the counseling at the church, or the marriage counseling, or the grief and support group at the church, we need to have the resources in the community just for their safety, their emotional safety, their physical safety, and for that confidentiality.
Wonderful. And that's exactly what, what we stress. And also, as you were talking, I'm also thinking about every counselor is not for everybody. And every minister and ministry is not for everybody. And, sometimes things work out well and it works. And I always tell people, shop around. Meet with one counselor. If there's a connection, that's great. And then meet with another counselor, and once you find one that you really connect with and feel that they can help you and support you, stick with them. I have, I've been in practice, over 5 years, and I have clients still, they may take off 6 months, a year, but something else comes up, but they always remember the service. They always remember kind of what's going on and what's happening. And what they do is then they'll refer, or come back to me and then refer others. And so it does work out pretty well. Now, on this show, Dr. Tinsley, we've been also talking about mental health and coming up with a working definition. So in your opinion and in your clinical training and in your experience, as we integrate the mental health and the spirituality for empowerment, can you talk a little bit about what mental health is, according to what, your experience and your training is? Because we want people to buy into it, but they sometimes don't understand. And that word is kind of used nationally. Oh, they just crazy, or they just whatever, and we ignore a lot of processes that are going on. So what is your definition of mental health, and how does it look, and all of those type of things around that question?
Absolutely. And I'm going to take the technical definition. I have it in front of me.
Wonderful.
Mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So it's a state of well-being. And the well-being areas are emotional well-being, psychological well-being, social well-being. So we are designed to be in relationships, and we are designed to be able to manage our emotions. We are designed to be able to make good decisions. However, when the stressors of life start to get in the way of those areas, and affect one's daily functioning, that's where we might have a mental health issue. And one of the things we have to help people to understand, there is situational depression. There is situational anxiety because of something going on. And it doesn't mean that if you go to counseling now, you're going to have to go the rest of your life. And part of shattering this myth and stigma is helping people to understand this, there's nothing negative about having a mental health challenge and having a mental illness. So I talked about mental health as a state of well-being. Mental illness is a collection of all diagnosable mental disorders or health conditions that are characterized by an alteration in thinking, mood, behavior, or some combination that is associated with distress and impaired functioning. So here it is. If we start seeing the depression lasting longer than 2 weeks, longer than 4 weeks, then we need to maybe say there is some type of alteration in mood. That person's not getting out of bed. That person's not engaging in the regular activities of life. Or somebody's having a panic attack, or somebody's experienced some trauma. That is okay. And just like we go to the doctor if we have a cold, just like we get diagnosed with diabetes and have to take medication, it's the same thing for our mental health. The difference is you're not able to see it, okay? And I think people need to understand the different types of mental illness. So we may have those anxiety disorders. We may have depressive disorders. We may have trauma and stressor-related disorders. Substance abuse and addictive disorders. So there's a different, and we just need to continue to educate our communities to break those stigmas, to know that it is okay. We all may have some type of challenge with our mental health. That could be temporary and situational, but we also may have some who are diagnosed with mental illness and they can still live a wonderful life with help, with treatment, with support. You know how it says in scriptures, faith without works is dead? And so a person has to continue to work on their mental health just as much as they're working on their physical health.
Yes, exactly. And and I just heard that state of being, and people really need to. And also, I teach my clients, Dr. Tinsley, a lot about being still. And sometimes I call it meditation and affirmations. But sometimes we just need to be still because everything is so busy. Everybody's so rushed. We got 50 million things we got to do. And sometimes we got to stop the process and sit still. And then even in counseling, walk through those moments, because I think we're so busy living life sometimes that we just forget about why we're here and what the purpose is and what we're here to learn and how we're here to be helped, but also help others. And so I help kind of people through that. I also want you to talk about your doctoral work in sports, in the sports arena. I don't know a whole lot about it myself, but I know that, I have been in dialogue with you and you've shared parts of your wonderful doctoral work at United Theological Seminary. Can you share some of the things? Because I know athletes are really, and we're going to have an athlete, a retired NBA player on here, and I'll share that at another time. But help, speak to the athletes, the ones that are very, that are in sports and and they got some, mental health challenges and issues. And sometimes that's a little different, because of the context can be a little different than just, your average person. So if you could talk about your doctoral work and then also just about, your work with athletes and sports management and all of those type of things.
Absolutely. So here it is. I just talked about what is mental health, what is mental illness. The Mental Health America had put out a statement that every year about 1 in 5 American adults will have a mental health condition.
Wait, hold on. 1 in 5. I want to make sure people hear that. Say that again, please.
1 in 5.
Wow, that's a lot.
And so if you sit in your church and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, what happens outside of the church doesn't stop at the door when you come into the church. So people are bringing their being. And if you think about it, who they are out there comes in the church, And mental illness and mental health conditions is an equal opportunity illness health
Yes.
condition. It does
Yes.
not discriminate by age, ethnicity,
Yes.
gender. It does not discriminate by work fields that you may be in,
Yes.
including the athlete field. And if we say 1 in 5 in American adults will have a mental health condition, it is
Yes.
also said that only 41% of them will receive services. So for
41%.
me, that was 41%
Wow.
will receive, that's less than half, will receive the necessary services. And here's what came here. I'm a former college athlete, played basketball. I understand the culture and the identity of sport. And one of the things that was hurting my heart is that when we talk about transition and retirement from sports,
Yes.
sometimes that can be challenging for some individuals. And there has been some research that says if a person doesn't have an integrated identity and know who they are,
Yes.
then drug and alcohol abuse increases, depression increases,
Yes.
self-harm increases. But also, there has been in the past 10 years a higher number of athletes who have attempted suicide, have committed suicide,
Yes.
or homicide. And so we need to do a better job of educating about mental health and breaking the stigmas in this culture as well.
Yes.
And so with my dissertation at United
Yes.
Theological Seminary, the goal was to show that theologically and biblically that having the ability and gift of sports is just that. It is a gift.
Yes,
but
it
then
is.
also we have to show that who you are outside of the sports, you're still a child of God. And we have to
Yes.
help those in the church, help those athletes, because I would see athletes who were lost after they were done playing. And we have to be able to help them to understand who they are and their identity in Christ and who they are and their identity outside of sports. So I do a lot of work with dispelling the stigmas and myths in the athlete population as well, helping the athletes understand that you can go to counseling. And there's an issue about confidentiality and privacy as well. Will my coach find out? What does this mean about my playing time? And so we have to show that, again, there's confidentiality and privacy, and that it's important to take care of your mental health, even if you are Johnny who plays golf or basketball.
Yes. Yes. And that's very vital too, because a lot of times people think that just because people are millionaires that they don't have a mental health issue, or just because they can buy anything that they want to buy, or they're successful, or they're on television, or they're on radio, that they don't have any issues.
Right. And that's, again, mental health conditions is an equal opportunity condition. It does not discriminate about socioeconomic status.
Yes.
So, you know, in our society, we have 13 to 14% of the American population who has a diagnosable mental illness. And it is across the lifespan, across the spectrum of income, races, gender. So it's just really important for people to know that anybody can have a mental health condition.
Yes, and that's very vital, you know, to know that. But still, just going back again about the people that only 40-some%, I think is what you said, get help.
Yes.
And so therefore, that's what the calling of, I feel, the church is. The church, you know, we are missing out on opportunities every Sunday. We're shouting, we're dancing, we're singing, which is wonderful. We're speaking in tongues in some church, whatever people do, laying hands, praying, which is wonderful if that's, you know, your belief. But at the end of the day, people are not being changed and transformed. People are going home to the same old situations. There's no transformation, because I do believe that the Christian life involves and invokes transformation and change. And a lot of times we don't talk about that. We just kind of go through the motions, but we're not changing. We're not changing our minds. We're not changing how we talk about ourselves. We're not changing how we talk about others. We're not changing how we see God and how we see things. And we have to do the work of working through our mental processes and helping those things. And what I say on the show, Dr. Tinsley, a lot of times is it deals with your childhood. We do not deal
Right.
with the issues. And we think, these stigmas that we've, talked about on the show, and I'm going to continue to talk about, is what happens in the house stays in the house. Or if it didn't
Absolutely.
kill you, it made you stronger. And those, some of those things are self-defeated language that is not helpful these days in our community, because people make excuses for not getting the help that they need and the support that they need. And a lot of times ministers are just saying, just pray. That's all you need to do. God will, supply everything, of course. And we do believe that God will supply everything, but just pray. And that's all you need. And on this show, we emphasize that part of your spiritual, and that's part of my doctoral work, part of your spiritual development is getting your mental processes and getting, straight, and getting to a better place of well-being, as you said in the definition, a better state. And we all need help sometime. We all have had loss. We've all have had grief. All of us have had sometimes depressive moods and depression and anxiety and all kinds of things that are going on. And that's what mental health counseling does. It helps people with those processes and walks alongside them for their transformation and for their healing. So I just think that that is powerful. So we're joined here today on Therapeutic Conversations with your host, Bryan Jones, LPC. And I'm joined today with Dr. Tanya Tinsley, who has given us a wealth of knowledge and in the field. What else do you want them to know about your work or about you, and how can they reach you, Dr. Tinsley?
So they can reach me in a number of ways.
Okay.
They can reach me through Mount Arad Counseling Center. My email is ttinsley@mt-arat, ARARAT.org.
Okay. Can you say that again to make sure they get it? You didn't say that again.
Yes. So it's my first initial last name,
Okay.
Tinsley, at mt-arat, ARARAT.org.
As we know in counseling, the number one.
Okay. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
They can reach me through social media. I am on Twitter, Dr. Tanya Tinsley. We also, the Mount Arad Counseling Center is on Twitter, MABC_MAC, MACC.
Okay.
And I am more than open to talking to people if they have individual questions. How do they go and educate their churches and their ministers? Because I think it's really important before we can continue to help those 1 in 5 in our congregation. We have to have formal training.
Yes.
And there's different training just to understand and being aware and understanding the treatment modalities. And you are absolutely right. You talked about praying, and we have to help people to understand praying is part of it. But we also have to think about the cognitive piece, the thinking and understanding. And that's like that scripture I read this morning really talks about all three.
Yes.
And you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. That's the spiritual, okay? And with all your mind, thought, and understanding. If there is something going on with thought and understanding, that may get in the way of loving your Lord, loving God. And so we need to make sure that we provide support with all your strength. That's that physical, and making sure you understand mind, body, and soul is very much connected.
Yes, and it's all connected, and we need to know that out there in everything. And what I want you to do is, I know a lot of people have tried to call in and things, and we're still working on some technical difficulties with that. But I want you to send me a message on Facebook. Any questions that you have, first, like the Therapeutic Conversation Show. We would love for you to send us questions there. I can answer questions on Saturdays when I'm here. We have other guests that are going to be coming in and doing things like that. There is one caller that's on the line. I'm going to try to answer this call now. Caller 5399. Caller, you have a question? Okay, I don't think they're still there. Okay, I was trying to answer the call. All right. So, but we are going to work on that so you can call in. But in the meantime, you can send questions and comments on my Facebook page, Therapeutic Conversation Show. And that way, I can answer those questions until we can work out some of the live calling technical difficulties. But people, please reach out. Reach out to Dr. Tinsley. Reach out to myself. There are other people around the nation. Even with Dr. Tinsley, she travels around at conferences as as a speaker. What was one of the last ones before we go that you went to? Because I know you always doing some workshop or teaching somewhere in the nation. And so, what was one of the last ones that conference that you did? That you spoke at?
A couple weeks ago, I was in Chicago at the Association of Counselor Educators and Supervisors. Next week I'll be in King of Prussia with Dr. Andre Ivy. He's a pastor. We are presenting a workshop on building alliances, pastors and counselors together. Okay. And so we're excited about that because we're both really going to, Dr. Andre Ivy, he's a pastor in Baltimore, but he's also a licensed clinical social worker. So
somebody's on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Streaming going on.
Okay.
So you got to tell them to turn off your streaming.
Okay.
So you got 7081, they're on, and you got...
Okay. You have to turn off your streaming. I'm sorry, Dr. Tinsley. 7081. I can take the call, but you have to turn off your streaming. It's bouncing back. Are you there? 7081 is the last 4 digits of your phone number. You have a question?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Dr. Francis. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. How you doing?
Doing good,
Dr.
good.
Dr. Francis, yes. What question do you
I was
have?
trying to get in on the call. I guess I need to turn this down.
Yeah, you got to turn your streaming off. All right.
Okay.
You're still there. What question do you have? And explain to the people who you are, because we know who you are.
We sure do.
How y'all doing?
Wonderful.
This is Dr. Francis.
Wonderful.
Yes, this is Dr. Thomas Francis. I'm a mentor at United Theological Seminary, as well as a chaplain here in Atlanta, Georgia, for hospice care.
Yes.
And author of 2 books now. Thank God.
And talk about your books while we got you on. Yeah, talk about your books.
Yes.
Okay, well, the first book, my specialty in counseling and pastoral counseling is grief counseling, for one thing. And I wrote the book. My first book was I Watched Them Die, and Dying Lives Matter. And the second book just came out this week. It's for children. It's an illustrated book of explaining to children about grief, how to handle grief, and it's done in a cartoon type of way, using balloons, and actually the air in the balloons represent the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
But that book is just coming out. It came out yesterday.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you, Doc. I'm glad to see this on this morning. I've done a few things myself in this area. As a matter of fact, Dr. Jones was on one of my...
yes. And we're going to have you on the show, too, soon to talk about
that.
And you have a foundation, too, a nonprofit foundation. So there's a whole lot of things that you have, and I want to have you on the show. So I'm so glad you're calling in to just share. And how can people reach you? Because, I mean, you called in, and I want people to be able to contact you. What's the easiest way to reach you, or several ways to reach you?
Okay, well, the easiest way to reach me is through email.
Okay.
And that's T as in Thomas, and then my last name is Francis.
Yes.
FRNCI. Leave the S off and replace it with a 6.
Okay.
So it's TFRANCI6 at bellsouth.net.
Okay. All right. So that's
the best way to reach me.
The best way to reach you.
Yes. But I know this is not about me this morning. So let me just say this. I want to first congratulate you and Dr. Tinsley in what you're presenting today, because I feel like there's a illness in the church community.
Yes.
And how we should go about dealing with it. Now, one thing that I'm concerned with in the church community is, because I've seen this myself in being called to preach and all of this.
Yes.
And I once did have a church. But the people that's leading the church, I don't know if they haven't looked at themselves or neglected to look at themselves, and they're actually over the pastor.
Yes.
So when you bring that into the fold, and you have certain behaviors that have not been addressed or looked at, it causes confusion within the church structure.
Wow.
And even sometimes it can cause the pastor to leave or be pushed out because of maybe one person's behavior, but that person has leadership in the church. So now, where I'm going with this is, do you think, and this is for Dr. Tinsley too as well, do you think that it would be meaningful or advantageous to set up a system that people who do the calling of the pastor, those are the ones that's really mandating everything, that they be at least trained or examined even before they are put in a position to call a pastor or mandate his life.
Yes.
Do you think that would be advantageous in the church setting? That's my question.
Dr. Tinsley, you want to answer that first?
Absolutely. I definitely think that it would be advantageous. So here it is, Bryan, we were talking about different cultural groups. So we could talk about the cultural group of the church. We could talk about the cultural group of athletes. We need to talk about the cultural group of those ministers and pastors who are called.
Yes.
We are not immune to having some type of mental health condition.
Yes.
Right.
And just because you're called does not mean you don't have any unfinished business that you have to deal with.
Wow.
And so if that person, and so my belief, this is just Tanya Tinsley, I believe you can only counsel and minister to people as high as you've allowed yourself to go.
Yes.
And so what happens is if you have your own unfinished business or it's causing you some depression or anxiety, that is going to impact your work with ministry and counseling to your congregants.
Yes.
I like some churches and some denominations where if somebody is called, they do need to get a psychological evaluation. As part of my practice, I'm a consultant with one denomination that when people are called, they do need to come and get a psychological evaluation to identify areas they need to work with and work through as they're going through the process.
Yes.
So I just truly believe that just because we are ministers or pastors in the church, that we don't have some unfinished business that we also need to deal with.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. And we got to wind down, but I would say the same thing because even with the United Church of Christ, where I'm ordained with also National Baptist and all of that, but currently with the United Church of Christ, they require a psychological evaluation. And I also push that every so often